Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by Review Maxer.
Welcome back to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. We really appreciate you tuning in and helping us help you stay on top of PR. Today, we're talking about how to use editorial calendars to get earned media coverage. And today, I am doing a solo cast, which means it's just me. There's not a guest. Today's episode is all about me sharing some of my thoughts and experience with you to help you improve your practice of public relations. So regarding how to use editorial calendars to get earned media coverage, we're going to walk through what is an editorial calendar, how to use editorial calendars to help your pitching, and how to take actions to clarify what editors are looking for and when to develop your pitches, as well as a bonus tip at the end. So please stand by for that. So again, welcome. I'm Jason Mudd. My agency is Axia Public Relations. And if this is your first time tuning in, we produce this podcast on top of PR with the goal of helping you stay on top of PR and various public relations and corporate communication topics, tips, and trends. Editorial calendars are a tool that is used predominantly by print and digital publications, and specifically their advertising departments, to kind of help plan out and coordinate between advertising and the editorial or newsroom or features department upcoming coverage that has a theme. And that theme is typically a feature or a focus area of interest that is happening. Perhaps if it's a monthly magazine, that's the feature or the theme of that particular issue. So an easy one to think about is kind of the holidays. So the November or December issue of a national consumer magazine might have a special emphasis on holiday gift-giving tips. And so throughout the issue, it's going to have articles pertaining to certain themes or certain types of gift giving for certain people that might be the difficult person to give in your life, or gift ideas for kids or parents or loved ones. So it depends on the overarching theme of the magazine or publication, or the online edition as well. Also, there's some newsletters that are very popular, both in print as well as digital and email, and popular blogs and even podcasts will sometimes do what's called editorial calendars or thematic calendars of the type of topics that they're looking to cover. So the ad department is using these calendars typically to try to recruit advertisers who want to sponsor that content, or be surrounded or form a perimeter around it, or maybe be a sponsoring ad on the opposite facing pages of this content. Now, PR people are looking sometimes in media relations and the practice of getting earned media coverage. They're looking for opportunities to become part of the conversation, part of the content, and integrated into the content, not just sponsoring the content. So kind of like if you are picking up a magazine, newspaper, newsletter, or tuning in to television or even streaming something, you're usually tuning in to be informed or entertained, or educate yourself on something. You're not looking to see who's advertising. So in this case, this is a cooperative effort between the ad department and the writing department to try to complement each other and put together some themes to candidly attract readers and attract advertisers. That's the purpose of doing these themes. So each magazine, and I'm going to say magazine or publication, but again, it could apply to websites, podcasts, newsletters, and even popular blogs and things like that. But for the sake of this episode, we're going to call those magazines. So there are two types of magazines or media format, right? There's B2B and there's consumer. There's business media and there's industry trade media. And there's consumer media that is trying to attract enthusiasts and hobbyists and people who are passionate about the topic that they're writing about. Each of these magazines will produce, typically in the fourth quarter, what's called an editorial calendar, planning out their coverage for the next calendar year. So if you're listening to this and it's 2023 about to be 2024, or it's 2024 about to be 2025, etc., you are probably in the market right now as a media relations professional or a PR or corporate communication professional looking for earned media opportunities. You should be in the market of acquiring editorial calendars and skimming through them month by month, looking for opportunities of how you might insert your client, your experts, your employer, their topics and expertise into the editorial or news content of this editorial calendar. Some places to look for these is like your local business journal. Again, your national, regional, local industry trade publications and websites, as well as the consumer media magazines you see on the rack and things like that would be relevant for these types of topics. So come fourth quarter, they're typically producing their content or their editorial calendar of what they're going to cover in the next calendar year. And so as early as October, November, December is when you start reaching out to these target news outlets and asking them to send you a copy of their new editorial calendar. Now, don't be surprised. Some of these outlets do not have these ready until after Christmas, which I'm just can only imagine has got to be tough for them to produce a January, February, or March issue if they don't even have their editorial calendar ready until January. So the truth is, it is done. It just may not be ready in a public distribution standpoint. Maybe it's not laid out yet. Maybe it's still being tweaked on in the latter months. But clearly by November, December, they've got to know what's coming up in the January issue, because this is the one key major takeaway from this episode is you need to be pitching editorial calendars at least 90 days ahead of time. And speaking of ahead of time, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but a rookie mistake I see is that a cub or junior or entry level media relations professional or public relations professional will see, let's say, an editorial calendar opportunity in December, and they start pitching it in late November, misunderstanding that these publications are typically working months ahead of time, not days ahead of time, and they're not producing or turning around content instantly. And so you really need to be looking at the deadlines and communicating sooner with the contacts in the newsroom. Let's get to that in just a minute with a little bit more. But as you're looking at editorial calendars, you're looking for fits or opportunities to kind of sneak in or latch on or ride the coattails of a theme or a topic that they're planning on covering. So PR professionals use these editorial calendars to help develop ideas and opportunities for their pitches. Now, how do you do that? How do you use an editorial calendar to help your pitching? First of all, you want to use the calendars that determine the content / ideas that these publications are looking for. So the content and ideas they're looking for, again, might be around a theme. It might be, how to winterize your home. It might be how to organize your closet for winter, or how to declutter for summer. It might be about how to recruit salespeople for your company. It might be about how to prepare for tax season for personally and or for your business. It just depends on the overarching theme of the magazine or the outlet that you're going after. But what you want to do is kind of prioritize, what are your clients' goals for PR? What are they trying to accomplish? What messages do they want to get out there? And then and what you're working on this year that you think would be relevant. Maybe you're rolling out a new product, a new service, entering new markets, looking to win awards, looking to raise visibility among certain audience segments. And so the editorial calendars can give you cues and clues as to what they're going to be covering that you might be a fit for when you go to pitch. So use this as an opportunity to craft the perfect pitch to align your client, your expert, your employer, your thought leader with the topics that this outlet is looking for. And so, some states have statewide magazines or a local business journal in your metropolitan area. They're going to do things like fastest growing company, or they're going to talk about different business related topics that you could try to squeeze your client into. And so be sure to craft a pitch that would be not just interesting to your company, of course, but more importantly, interesting to the media outlet that you're pitching, and most importantly, interesting to the audience that they serve, which is ultimately how and why, or how they should make their decisions on what they cover. Is this interesting to our readers? They're not very interested on if it's interesting to you, the person who's kind of shameless self-promoting or pitching your company. they're not interested in if your CEO would be interested in seeing this topic covered. They want to know if a majority of their audience would be interested in seeing this covered, and does it give them good support to create or for advertisers to be attracted to it. So that's how you can use your editorial calendar to help you pitch. But let me go a little further in that. So when you get the editorial calendar, in fact, let's talk about how you go about getting it first. So the way you go about getting an editorial calendar is, again, in the months of October, November, December, and January, is when you start reaching out to your ideal publications that you want your client or you want to be featured in. I would narrow this down to maybe a handful, maybe 10 or 12, certainly no more than 20 or 25, just depending on your organization. Although we have clients that are actively doing business in 6 industry verticals, and those 6 actually, and we have another one that's doing it in about 10 or 12. And those 6 to 12 industry verticals all have specific trade journals that cover their industry. And so it's possible on a big enough client or a big enough company, we might have 150 target news outlets on our list. We divide that list up into business units or divisions. And then there's different representatives from our team working on each of those business units or divisions. And so with that specialization, they're taking on the connections and contacts with those news outlets. They're developing the media list for those outlets. They're developing the contacts there. They're developing the editorial calendars, and they're building relationships with those people on an ongoing basis. So what you want to do is you want to reach out to the outlet that is producing this editorial calendar. Now, my preferred way to do that is to hit their website, go into the advertising section, and try to get an editorial calendar in real time, either by downloading it as a PDF, viewing it on their website. Sometimes you have to fill out a form where they will register you as a sales lead for paid media or advertising. And then you just ask for it from that, through that form. Sometimes that means you'll have to work with a sales rep to have them send it to you. And of course, they're looking oftentimes to sell you paid media or advertising or a sponsorship so that they can earn a commission. And we can't fault them for that. That's what they do for a living. And, they're there to help many brands, potentially including yours, subsidize their PR program with paid media, which is always a good idea in many cases. But I'll leave that up to you and your employer to decide. But ultimately, you want to ask them to send you the editorial calendar. I always like to start with self-serving or DIY, do it yourself. Try to get a hold of it yourself without connecting with anybody, without bothering anybody, and without being sold by anybody. But if that's not possible, the advertising department or advertising rep is always more than happy to send it to you, and always more than happy to take your order for advertising as well. Now, in that particular case, if you're not able to get it from their website, either DIY or through a contact, the other thing you might do is just send them an email instead of filling out a form, or just do the old-fashioned thing of picking up the phone and asking. Now, an alternate contact besides sales is often an editorial assistant, and that would be a good person to reach out to, either A, to ask for the editorial calendar, or B, and more importantly, to actually pitch the content you want to pitch for the editorial calendar. So with that, we're going to take a quick break and be back on the other side, where I'm going to tell you how to go about pitching to the editorial assistant or to that news outlet once you have a copy of the editorial calendar in your hands. And we'll tell you how to go through it in just a second.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. We're talking about editorial calendars. It's that time of the year to really start thinking a lot about editorial calendars, but there's never a bad time to grab the current editorial calendar and start looking into it. Once you have the editorial calendar in your hands, whether it's digital or you printed it out or however it might be, the first thing you want to do is you want to kind of start being an investigator. You want to start being a little bit of a detective. Not only do you want to skim through the topics and the timing by month and the deadlines, you want to start to figure out, okay, how much notice do they need before the deadline? What's the submission deadline for your ads? What's the date that it's going to run? You want to learn and get familiar with all of those dates. So sometimes the submission deadline in the editorial calendar is actually focused on the advertisements deadline, not on the submission deadline for content. So you want to make sure you have some clarity on what is the deadline for advertising, what is the deadline to submit stories. Some editorial calendars don't give you a deadline for when to submit stories because they're hyper focused on advertising deadlines. Some people consider these submission deadlines to also be called active deadlines. So you want to definitely make sure you see a difference, or you know the difference between the ad deadline and the submission to submit a pitch or an article's deadline. If you don't know that, this is when you start to become friends with the editorial assistant. The editorial assistant is somebody in the newsroom who is helping the editors do their job. This tends to be a little bit more, but not always, a little bit more of a junior or cub person, a junior woodchuck, as my friend would say, in the organization. But typically it's somebody who is there to be helpful to you and to the editors. And so they're going to have good insight and good access to the editors to ask them your questions. And this person is typically a very organized individual who is really charged with making the editor's life easier. And so if the editorial assistant is helping you, then the editors are not being distracted and disturbed with their work by your inquiries to them. So that's why it's good to work with the editorial assistant. But I want to emphasize that this is a relationship business, and we as in the public relations profession need to start putting more emphasis into relationships. And if you've listened to many of my podcasts, I talk about this often, but the relationship is the important part. So you want to build a lasting relationship with this editorial assistant. So you want to be very kind to them. You want to be very professional with them. You want to be very respectful towards them. But this is also an important time to leverage this contact into getting answers to questions that you might have. So again, once you have that editorial calendar, you start to study it, you start to dissect it, you start to kind of investigatively figure it out and how it all works. Then you want to approach the editorial assistant with about a specific topic for a specific issue. So you might say, hey, I see in your April issue, you're doing a section on how to select a home improvement or a home services company for your home. So you might say, hey, since this article is appearing in April, what's the deadline that your team would have to submit their articles for publication for this April issue? And then they'll tell you what it is. And then whether this is by phone, email, DM, text message, or however you've reached this person, then you might say, okay, and when would be the right time, or what would be the timing that you start assigning these stories out for your April issue? And then they will give you a date. And don't be surprised if the date is December or January or maybe February. And then you might say, okay, and if I wanted to pitch our expert or our company for inclusion in that April story, when would be the right time to reach out to your organization, and who would be the right person for me to reach out to share this? Now, the answer you might get, they could say, hey, it's going to be me. Here's the date that we have a meeting to start planning that issue. You might say, hey, I don't know. The editorial assistant might say, hey, I don't know who that is yet, so contact me. Or I don't know who that is yet, contact us in X number of weeks and we'll let you know. Or they might say, hey, our writer, Dolly, Sally, Devin, Melissa is writing that section or is taking the lead on that section, or this special section editor, Bob, is in charge of that. You'll want to reach out to him or her. And so just follow those instructions very carefully. Timing is very critical. Timing is of the essence. You don't want to miss these opportunities or these deadlines. I recommend 90 days before the submission deadline, maybe even as much as 120 to 180 days ahead of time. You're reaching out to someone, you're building a relationship, you're having a conversation, you're staying in touch, you're expressing interest in being helpful. You want to position yourself as being a helpful resource. You want to position yourself as being helpful to them, not being annoying, not being demanding of them, but wanting to be a cooperative partner in this process. Now, once you know the timeline, you want to create a spreadsheet or some kind of project management document where you're tracking these opportunities and your effort on them. The key thing to do is sort it by deadline so that you don't miss these deadlines, and maybe highlight the cell with the deadline or make it red, and then sort it in order of deadline so that you're always working ahead of time and ahead of yourself. So don't guess what the editors are thinking about in these editorial calendars. Ask questions early and often. Get a good sense of what they're looking for in the right angle so you can have a competitive advantage against all the other PR people who are not submitting laser-focused content that really matches what the editor is looking for. You can have a competitive advantage against the PR people who waited till the last minute to pitch and they're not as proactive as you are and as we are and as I'm describing to you. The other thing you want to do is just beat the PR person who waits till a month or a week before either the submission deadline or even the ad deadline or even the issue release date, where they just have egg on their face. And I see this all the time with junior woodchucks and cub or entry level PR pros. They just start pitching an editorial calendar days or weeks ahead of time. What they don't realize is that is already written, edited, finalized, and maybe even already at the printers, maybe in mailboxes. You just missed your chance, and you got to be early. So I would say start pitching 90 days before the deadline. I'm more comfortable with 120 to 180 days ahead of time, just to get yourself out there early and often and start building that relationship. So you ask the editors, also ask the editors, what type of story are they looking for when it comes to the theme? For example, for technology, they don't want a million articles, or they don't even want a dozen articles for that matter, that are all covering the same text subject. You really want to help them narrow down their focus. If the section is about technology, I would clarify, is that digital technology? Is that home technology? Is that business technology? Is it cybersecurity technology? Like, what's the focus? Because technology is very broad. And so you want to make sure you're all singing from the same song sheet or all on the same page. And then whatever that editor wants, you want to mirror back to that in your pitch. You want your custom crafted pitch to be exactly what the editor wants to see. You want it to be music to their ears as they're reading your pitch. Like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, right? So you've got to find in some level some perfect intersection or Venn diagram between what your client wants, what the editor wants, and ultimately what their reader wants, and how you can be a helpful expert or helpful advisor or helpful content contributor or source or resource or reference for what they're writing. Okay, so now we've talked about what's an editorial calendar, how to use it, when to pitch it, what actions to take. And then we want to talk about, and we talked a little bit about mapping out your editorial calendar and an idea of getting it organized, right? And spend time pitching each month between the categories of editorial pitching, proactive pitching based on your calendar, and then your ongoing just general reactive media relations. So an editorial calendar is one of many tools in a PR pro's quiver or toolbox or whatever it might be. It's not the only one. I would say it's often underutilized or underappreciated, sometimes even forgotten. But if you start your homework, for the year, at the beginning of the year, or whenever you start doing a new initiative or you see a new publication, just jump in on the editorial calendar, start looking at it, start tearing it apart a little bit and figuring out how it works and what parts and pieces you and your clients or your boss or thought leader or experts would be a good fit for. Now, here's the bonus tip that I offered earlier. This is something that we've done over the years. It's not always been successful, but it's kind of a unique play that I think could be very valuable to you. So when you look at an editorial calendar, I'm just going to stick to the example of April. If you see in April that your target industry trade magazine is doing topics that you want to become an expert contributor towards, or you want to be cited or sourced in that magazine or in that issue or on that topic, I recommend, again, 90 to 180 days ahead of time, start working on content. So here's what I mean by that. Number one, if the editorial opportunity is in April, maybe in January, you're publishing a blog post, social media post, you're doing a podcast episode, you're doing an email blast on that same topic, planting a seed with that reporter or that news outlet and its editor with this idea of, hey, I'm already a thought leader on this topic. I've already been writing about it. In fact, here's some recent content that I produced just a couple of months ago that they will either see on your LinkedIn or see on your blog post, or maybe they subscribe to your email newsletter. Don't subscribe them to your newsletter without their permission or their consent or their agreement to do so. Please don't spam them. But if you could start producing content weeks and months before you're pitching it, or weeks and months before they're looking for an expert in this space, maybe they will find you in their Google search. Maybe they will see you in their X feed or their LinkedIn feed, or maybe on TikTok or Instagram, where they see your content and they go, hey, that sounds like somebody I want to interview. So if you know they're doing something in an April issue, try to get your stuff ranking in the search engines by April, or well before April, obviously. But you want to do it by January, I would say, so that come the time in January, February, where they're writing about this topic, and maybe they're writing about it even earlier, you might rank in there, is really my point. I think this is a really good tip. And this is where you can look at editorial calendars and your content calendar at your company and start weaving them together. So you're always working at least a month, if not more, maybe several months ahead of the editorial calendar for that same topic within your industry. By the way, if you need help putting together your own content calendar for your own content that you're producing, again, blogs, social media, email, podcast, etc., look to your industry trade media and what their editorial calendars cover, and then emulate similar topics for yourself and your own content that's in there. So in summary, this is how you tackle editorial calendars. I highly recommend you delegate the collection, the research and the collection of editorial calendars down to the lowest ranking person in your organization. And candidly, making it the most affordable exercise. So the further down you delegate, in theory, the cheaper it becomes to accomplish it. There's no reason why high-ranking people in your corporate comms or PR department should be doing this type of work. This is a perfect assignment for an intern or an entry-level person or the department assistant to be working on collecting all of these, organizing these, put them in the shared folders, or however you want to organize them, start spreadsheets and that kind of thing. And then you want maybe a entry level or even a mid-level person to kind of comb through and remove and take out the ones that aren't a good fit, and really start to laser focus and groom the opportunities that are there to make sure you're finding the best opportunity for your organization. And then collaboratively as a team, start looking at these opportunities and thinking through, who's our best expert on this? What's our best angle? And how do we get, what's the best timing, and what do we need to do to prepare that person or prepare our pitch or otherwise. Now, two more thoughts come to mind here. Number one is, don't be surprised when the editor or editorial assistant comes back to you and says, hey, I really like your pitch. Could you have your expert write 500 words, 1,000 words, 800 words on this topic for us? And you can always say no, but that's a great opportunity to control the words and the expression and the way that you write this content without waiting on being interviewed, hoping to be included in a story or that kind of thing. So be opportunistic about the opportunity when they ask you to submit something. Be ready to do that. The other thing I would just tell you as well, speaking of being prepared, there's no reason why you can't start working on your pitches now. Start training your spokesperson now for that opportunity. So you have your pitch ready to go, and on that date, you've just flagged yourself or set a reminder, inserted a calendar item to send that pitch so that you're ready to go and you're fully prepared. I'm a big believer in being prepared. The other tip I wanted to share is, remember, it's not shameless self-promotion. It's about helping. It's about putting the audience first. So whatever you're pitching, keep the rationale in mind of why, not why is it beneficial to you and why you want to be featured. Instead, you want to say why your story or your expertise or your helpful tips are ultimately going to be for the benefit of their audience. So it's not about you, it's about others, and keep that other focus when you're pitching so that you might have a better chance of being included. Hey, thank you for the opportunity to share with you more about editorial calendars. These are a powerful tool when you leverage them properly, when you know how to approach them correctly. Don't forget about editorial calendars, but don't lean on them exclusively. They're just one of many tools, but something this time of the year you should really be laser focused on using. So with that, this has been Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations, talking to you about how to use editorial calendars to get earned media coverage. And I hope this was helpful in helping you stay on top of PR. Be well.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.